Tara Bachland here with another herbalist to meet in our How to Become an Herbalist or Becoming an Herbalist series. Many of you already may recognize I'm Susan Leopold from the United Plant Savers. She is the executive director at the United Plant Savers, which many of you already know, playing a very key role, has taught at the Matthew Wood Institute of Herbalism with us, has also done many free offerings with us at the Matthew Wood Institute of Herbalism, many interesting conversations with Matthew as well. So I'm very pleased that she accepted my invitation to come and tell us her journey, her unique journey in becoming an herbalist. So thanks for joining me, Susan.
Yeah, happy to be here.
So are you a lifelong herbalist? I think when we see people regularly and it just seems like they were born herbalist. Were you a born herbalist?
It's a funny question. I don't know. I mean, I think, I definitely think I've always been really drawn to plants. And even, as a child, I have really fond memories of exploring my backyard. I was so grateful that I had a little woodland and a meadow and a pond. And so I certainly can think back. I have a funny story where I think I was in middle school and I was asked to do like a science project, and I don't know. I just came up with this idea about doing a hypothesis where I grew like one carrot in a container with just water and gravel, a carrot top. I just cut the top off the carrot. And then I grew 2 carrots in a container, 1 carrot on either side. And then I grew another container with water, gravel, all the same components, but a cluster of carrot tops in the middle. And then I charted like how they grew over time. I think like I don't know, 2 weeks maybe. And the cluster of carrots that were growing together grew like exponentially greater than the 2 carrots that were in the container apart from each other. And certainly the 1 carrot grew the least. And my hypothesis was that plants are just like people and need each other.
Wow.
I was like in 6th grade.
That's so cool.
I think I was just always thinking like that, I don't know, plants were like people to me. I don't know. I just like had that in my mind. It's so interesting to think back on that. But I was certainly kind of a sick child. I had really bad asthma and had the inhaler and was on the antibiotics all the time and had pneumonia in the hospital several times. And so I was really, seeking out like an alternative to the medications, because the breathing medications would like make you really like kind of like speed. And then, the antibiotics would just like rip your body apart. And so some of the first plants that I really bonded with, that I still have like a super strong bond with, I mean, when I started to eat raw garlic and it could clear up an infection as quick as antibiotics, I mean, I would cut raw garlic and just eat it on a piece of bread at the first sight of being sick, and hope that I would not get like a respiratory. But once I would, kind of get that like tight chest, I mean, I would just grate raw ginger and honey. I mean, those 2 plants, ginger and garlic, were like, my allies, so I was always seeking, kind of relief, warm tea, fortunately, I think due to I don't know, I grew out of that chronic asthma. So grateful for that. When you're so sick all the time and then you like, it's such a, you kind of just in that mode and you kind of struggle through it. But then when you're well and you think back to how many years you spent like struggling. So, with that being said, I was using garlic and ginger, when I was in high school. And then from there, exploring things like chamomile tea and mint tea but it was really, I went to college as like a geography major, and I got exposed to this concept of ethnobotany by coming across Richard Evan Schulte's book, The Healing Forest. And for me, it was like, a super big aha moment. When I read, like, I never heard the term ethnobotany. And when I read the term, the studying the relationship between people and plants, and then, the conservation of, because Richard Evan Schultes was really, kind of the preeminent voice, a Harvard, botanist who was advocating for the conservation of the rainforest because of the overwhelming number of medicinal plants that, we'd yet to even know about or study. And that's just one snippet of his life. But so that was just like an aha moment. So I've really always, I think the herbalist, I don't really consider myself an herbalist, but I have always been, I really consider myself an ethnobotanist and someone really kind of hyper focused on the conservation of plants and of the relationship between people and plants. So I had kind of a winding path, but it did seem like a natural fit that I would end up becoming the director of United Plant Savers. But that being said, like my journey of like studying plants, I mean, I think, everybody should think of themselves as a home herbalist. Everybody should think of themselves as their own healer, and should be confident to use medicinal plants in their life on the regular, and certainly extend that knowledge to your family and friends, or to know or have the knowledge so that when you're out and about, you can problem solve really basic health needs, because we all have them, especially when traveling, or and I think I would say too that another big thing for me was the Bach flower remedies. I mean, I also discovered them in high school. um, and having that ability to feel confident in using the rescue remedy. Yeah. So, just those kind of like really basic things were key, and still are key components of, just gratitude to the plant world. And that's, something that I often say is that herbalism is the gateway drug to activism, right? Because like once you start building that reciprocal relationship, that's, when you kind of open your mind to what's growing around you, and a greater awareness, and how you can be more involved with your environment. So anyways, that's a long rant.
It gives me a number of points to go back to. It's great. So in high school, it seems like it was really the point that you connected in with garlic and ginger in particular. Do you remember what was the inspiration to try those, and even like who led you to, or what, to the Bach flower essences?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. I would go to, my parents had like a beach home in Virginia Beach, and we would go there, and I would go to the Heritage Center, and they had a bookstore. Do you know who I'm talking about? I can't believe I'm forgetting his name. He was, it's gonna pop into my head.
Edgar Casey?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
So Edgar Casey had his research center and his hospital and facility in Virginia Beach, and then out of all of his remedies was the Heritage Bookstore. And you could go and get readings there, but they had a bookstore and a natural food product store, and of course they had the Heritage, where like one of his main remedies, right? Castor oil, and the rose water. And so if I had to think back, I really would, I was super into crystals. I just feel like the whole metaphysical thing was like a big draw for me. And I have a feeling, I can't really think of like a person who told me, oh, try this. I think it was like I was a kid in the bookstore, and I mean, the healing properties of garlic are like everywhere, right?
Yeah.
Um, it was probably just some, basic little book like garlic can heal everything or whatever, you know what I mean? And once I tried it and it worked, it was like, wow,
Yeah.
you know? Um,
Yeah, you
so
must have really been willing to try, I mean, to eat garlic sandwiches. It must really work well and totally, yeah, that's pretty amazing. It was, through all the interviews, that's been a component is there's kind of a synchronous, there definitely is a synchronous component. A lot of the stories there is, I had this ailment and it was only herbs that helped. And,
right.
and then there's certainly a synchronicity component as well. So it's pretty fascinating. So then you went to college and you thought you initially started in geology, but it sounds like you
Geography.
geography, sorry. And you did end up in botany, right? Ethnobotany?
Yeah, I found that book by Richard Evans Schultes in the Boston Museum. It's like that moment is like seared in my mind. It was like this box of discounted books, and I don't know. I just was like drawn to the book, and I
Wow.
picked it up, and I was like, oh my god! I of course bought the book, and I was just like consumed by it, and then it just like opened up this whole another world. Like, what is ethnobotany, and um, who's studying ethnobotany? Where do you study ethnobotany? And there wasn't really any place to go study ethnobotany as an undergraduate. I did semester at sea, and I remember meeting this guy at like a cafe in Malaysia, and I was talking to him. And in Malaysia, I ended up going on this like, ethnobotany excursion into the Malaysian rainforest, and got to travel with linguists and anthropologists. And so someone, clued me in. They were like, you should really look at Friends World College. Friends World College was a Quaker school, and they had different centers around the world, and they were based out of Long Island, and they had this farm, and they did this agreement where like Friends World College is under Long Island University, and Long Island University accredits it. And then, so I found out about it, and I was like, well, I'll just do a semester with Friends World College and then go back to BU. And Friends World College was very much like self-directed. And once I went to Costa Rica, there was no going back. I mean, so I just transferred to Long Island University's Friends World program, and I did a self-directed degree in tropical ethnobotany. And there, I lived with the Bribri up in the high mountains of Talamanca, and that's where I did my dissertation work. I call it a dissertation, but it's more like a thesis, because it was, the program through Friends World College was really like self-directed, and you had advisors, and you created courses for yourself, and then you kind of implemented what you put together. So yeah, I was just so grateful to find a school that supported me, and yeah, it was a great opportunity, and it's still in existence. Friends World College, which is part of Long Island. They've kind of changed the format a little bit, but they still have a center in Costa Rica. And then from there I went on I was, not sure what to do with my further education. I kind of thought I might go into education itself. But then I stumbled across this school called the Conway School of Landscape Design. And it's a very small school in Western Massachusetts, in Conway. Now it's moved to Northampton, which is like the next town over. but it's a very intensive 10-month master's program where you study the ecology of the landscape, and it's from a native plant perspective. And for me, it kind of felt like I really wanted to understand mapping and landscape ecology as a way of understanding botany, as a way of understanding plants. So yeah, anyways, it's a fantastic program. And people go on to do all different kinds of things, whether they become a landscape architect or design wetlands or work for a conservation organization. And that's what I kind of did. I worked for a land trust in Virginia, and then I went on to pursue my PhD in ethnobotany at Antioch. And Antioch, the undergrad program is based in Yellow Springs, Ohio, but they have a graduate school in Keene, New Hampshire. And again, I chose the Antioch program because their PhD allowed for you to kind of pursue, a very specific passion in environmental studies, whatever that was, so they were very supportive of me wanting to get a PhD in ethnobotany. And that dissertation you can read online. It's pretty interesting. It's the ethnobotany of a very small mountain range in Virginia. And I really look at this concept of dormancy in knowledge. So it's a deep dive into how knowledge about plants impacts how we interact with the landscape. It's a historical look at specifically the ethnobotany of the Bull Run Mountains. But I kind of, everybody talks about, we're losing this really, this indigenous knowledge, and certainly we are. We're losing languages. Indigenous people have lost their land, and there's been a lot of challenges and all those kinds of things. But the one thing that surprised me in my dissertation was that what I discovered, certainly, yes, knowledge had been lost, absolutely. But I also discovered that it really only takes one generation to bring the knowledge back. And I think that's a very inspirational way to look at things. It's so easy to be really dire with the loss of biodiversity and all the challenges we face. But as quick as knowledge can be lost, it can also be regained. And I think that's what we're witnessing right now in this kind of resurgence and people rediscovering herbal medicine. Maybe they didn't grow up with it. Maybe they didn't have it around them. Maybe they grew up in an urban area. Maybe they didn't know plants, but they can quickly learn that, and then they can pass that on to the next generation. And then instantly that spiritual, physical, mental, psychological, emotional connection, it's there, so I really feel like this concept of dormancy is a really kind of, we look at how plants go dormant, and then they reemerge. It's not gone, right? It's just underground. And I think you see that with all kinds of aspects of knowledge, not just knowledge about plants. I don't know. It's like we really forget to remember.
Forget to remember. Chew on that one for a while.
Yeah. So it's a lot about remembering. I don't know.
Yeah.
So I hope that sparks somebody. And when people, I constantly get asked what should I do? Where do I go? Where do I begin? And what I really recommend to people is it's often at the community college that you find a botany class. Really start with a basic botany class. It should be just fundamental, and then you kind of build. It's you kind of really get that understanding of plants, and then you can, and then it'll sort of come what direction you want to go in. And I don't think you have to get a degree or follow. I mean, I took a very academic path, but I don't know that that's, needed or necessary. Um, you know, but I think once you kind of, um, botany in a day. I mean, there's some great online programs too. I mean, but once you, sort of immerse yourself in that kind of fun to get that fundamental understanding of the plant world, then you sort of, can kind of leap off in whatever direction.
You intuited one of my questions was, but is more direct. Mine is directed at you. Is did you really have? It didn't sound like you necessarily had a plan, obviously, to be in herbalism or ethnobotany by what you said. But was there? It sounds like you remained rather open, just in general, to kind of follow your inner guidance.
Yeah, I would say so. And, because I took, kind of a very, I don't know, alternative route or whatever. I mean, that's what I did. I mean, I went and found, Miriam Lobstein was teaching botany at my community college, and I signed up for the class. I got involved in the Virginia Native Plant Society. I really, just kind of, jumped in, kind of wherever I could, and just kind of, yeah, meandered from there, I guess.
Well, it sounds like, some people will think, I'm going to be this in 5 or 10 years, and this is the
Yeah,
trajectory. But it didn't sound like you were trying to aim for that role.
no,
Like you didn't have, I'm going to be the director of the United Plant Savers in 10 years. It's just that was a part of the journey.
yeah, yeah.
Where do you think, if someone is considering formal education in botany, ethnobotany, health, maybe natural health practices, where have you seen that it actually does help someone to have that formal education? Where is there a point where it does make that difference?
I mean, I do think if someone's really looking um, to do plant conservation and research, then I do think, getting a degree in plant biology um, is a really good fundamental basis. A lot of and learning how to um, write, I think is, I mean, it's fundamental to anything,
Mhm.
but um, learning how to read academic literature and, understanding the epistemology or the modalities of research is, kind of critical. And I guess that's, where, my foundation is. And then I think, you know, there's the AmeriCorps program. There's a lot of opportunities to intern or volunteer in doing research in regards to plants. And I think um, in a lot of regards, your experience is so much is just as important as your school or your whatever academic work you do. Um, I mean, obviously, there's so many awesome herbal programs out there. Of course, like Matthew Wood Institute, and I mean, Rosemary Gladstar's, epic home study program, and so I do think there's a lot of quality information or courses that you can sign up for. It's so interesting, right? Like, do you become a naturopath? Do you go down the path of acupuncture or massage therapy? And in any of these realms, or working towards your AHG certification, and incorporating herbs into whatever healthcare practice I don't know, it'd be interesting to see how this whole kind of cannabis and cannabis nurse, I don't know, it's a tricky dynamic because as we know, plants are considered dietary supplements and you can't make claims about plants, and herbalism is, kind of in this really obscure realm. I also, my daughter's really into herbalism, has done a lot of herbalism courses, and she really wants to work with people and herbs, and so I've encouraged her to look at getting her degree in osteopathic medicine because there's a little bit more flexibility in incorporating herbs into your practice than, say, becoming an MD. So I think that's, certainly an option, but yeah, it's a delicate dance. And then there's just the whole like wide open world of making your own products and teaching people and getting a job in the natural products industry. There's a lot of herb companies are now bringing herbalists onto their staff, and they're doing it delicately, but they're walking that fine line of how to guide people into incorporating herbs into their everyday routine in a way that's safe and effective, and also in compliance with the FDA regulations. So how to talk about plants, and it's interesting, right? Because it's like it's okay to talk about plants emotionally, but you can't necessarily talk about them. It's a delicate dance. Like this herb will really make you feel uplifted. This herb might make you feel quieter and calm.
At the same time, they're saying herbalists are so ungrounded. It's just so airy fairy. It's like, well, this is the language that we can legally use. Also, yeah. There could be a place for, just botanical linguistics.
Yeah, botanical linguistics. So yeah, it's so diverse, whether you merge your passions, maybe you're passionate about marketing and passionate about herbs, and then you dedicate your marketing to people working with herbs. I don't know, it's just, or create experiences for people. It's really, I think, an exciting time to see all the diverse voices out there and how they're creating a living for themselves, doing what they love, So I think now more than ever, there's, you can really, if you have the passion and the drive, you can really create,
Yeah.
We're in a realm where we've created these platforms that make it really easy for people to express themselves creatively and live out their passion. But
being the executive director at United Plant Savers, I'm sure at some level you're involved in the hiring. And when your organization is hiring people, do they look for a certain background of formal education, or is it, basically, and of course it's going to depend on the role, but helping to distinguish for people if they're like, yeah, maybe I do want to go more of the traditional education route. Is it a factor at United Plant Savers?
Well, we really, we're a very small staff, but we are part of the AmeriCorps program, and that's a federally funded program, and we take on 2 AmeriCorps. And really what we're just looking for is people who are super passionate about plants, but, of course, like what we're more focused on is, the growing and the propagation and trail work and, really working with plants. So, it's been great to see people go through our AmeriCorps program, and maybe they've become an employee after doing so, or they've found other organizations that they can then do this work. So, That's one aspect. Yeah. And, it's tricky because honestly, I mean, I didn't think I would ever be in this role per se, but, a lot of what I do is, uh, fundraising.
Mhm.
So I've had to adapt and acquire a lot of skills that maybe, I didn't really want to acquire or do, but that was like, and I think that's something you're just going to run into with anything, like if you want to become a teacher or you want to write a book or you want to create a platform for yourself, like you're going to have to learn all these technical skills, to bring that to fruition. I think, that's just the way it goes. But
I don't know much of
I've,
the
I've had to, I've had to acquire a lot of skills in that regard.
no doubt. So that makes me curious. I don't know much of the history of United Plant Savers, but did UPS find you, or did you find UPS as far as, because you've been there for quite some time, haven't you?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, like I said, I came back from studying in the Amazon and in Costa Rica and Belize and throughout Latin America. I I had I had heard about United Plant Savers. It was just getting started. That was back in 1994. And I believe I was living in Virginia on my farm, and Kat Meyer, who lived about an hour from me at the time, she was the one that was like, oh, Rosemary started this new organization. And at the time they were doing these Planting the Future events where they would like come to a farm and camp out for a weekend and, do plant walks. And that was done as a fundraiser for United Plant Savers. So I held one of the first Planting the Future events at my farm, and Rosemary was there, Richard Lieberman, the first executive director, Paul Strauss, and lots of other herbalists, Jim Duke, Miriam Lobstein, the botanist I talked about, a lot of key people in the Washington, D.C. metropolitan area. And so I was a part of that, like, early excitement of United Plant Savers. But then I just kind of fell out. There wasn't the internet back then. There wasn't websites and, all this kind of stuff. And I went on to do my master's and my PhD and get married and have children and work for the land trust. And then I went on to work for Mrs. Mellon at her garden library, the Oak Spring Garden Library. And it was just about the time that I was finishing my dissertation, which took me a long time to finish. And I was working at Oak Spring Garden Library, and it was Kat who reached out to me, who said, hey, they've been trying to find a new executive director for quite some time, and I really feel like you should apply. And so I did, and I got to meet Sarah Katz, who was the current president of the board at that time. And so I guess it's a little bit of both. I guess they found me, I found them, but that's how it happened. And I think that, I don't know, I think it's been 14 years.
Time flies.
And yeah, and then UPS will be celebrating in 2024 its 30th anniversary, which is kind of big.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, yeah.
Stay tuned for announcements. I bet on some special.
Yeah, we're gonna break. March is gonna be our big kind of like 30th launch, and really focused around a membership drive, because that's really what the heart of UPS is. I mean, we kind of like hold the vision for medicinal plant conservation, and but it's really all the members that make all the magic happen. Whether you're just a member and you're passionate about plants and you're supporting the organization and you're learning through our journal and through our website and through our events, or if you become a botanical sanctuary and the work that you're doing on your own land. I mean, it takes all kinds of people doing all different kinds of things to achieve the mission of plant conservation. So, but yeah, anyways, so definitely going to be some announcements and fun stuff to unveil as the year goes on. And so yeah, it's I guess really I've been I think after 2024 I will have been the director, I think, for half of the organizations.
What have you seen? So in that amount of time, and I love to ask this also of herbalists who have been herbalists for quite some time, is what are some things that you've been able to see the effects of since you've been involved with UPS for such a significant amount of time? You know, what are some of the things that have come to fruition, or the results, or maybe even just people's eyes opening?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of our work has been in the realm of really bringing awareness to the idea of the forest farmer and cultivating these woodland botanicals. So I've seen a tremendous amount of growth in getting government support for these initiatives. We we played a big role in establishing the Appalachian Beginning Forest Farmers Coalition, and that's brought in other grassroots nonprofits and universities, extension agents. So what we're really going to witness, or what we are witnessing, is a huge transfer of ownership of land in the United States. So bringing in a new generation of landowners who are going to manage their forests in a different capacity is I think going to be huge. So I see that as a big role. I have seen a lot of herb companies really want to be more mindful of where they're sourcing their medicinal plants. I think the consumers are becoming much more mindful. I kind of compare it to, if you can imagine, like going back to like the 80s and the early 90s, when people are like, oh yeah, organic food, whatever, and now organic food is like mainstream, right? And so for me, like the next level of consciousness in people's awareness is like, okay, now where do your medicines come from? Where do your supplements come from? Like we need to apply the same sort of awareness and traceability and local access that we see, that we apply. I mean, food is medicine, herbs are food. So I feel like in another 10 years we're going to look back and we're like, remember when people would just buy whatever they thought they could buy off the shelf in Target and take it? What were they thinking? You know what I mean? So I feel like I'm seeing that. I mean, our botanical sanctuary network just keeps growing exponentially every year. So there's definitely all kinds of new people getting turned on to plants. And interestingly, it's women in my opinion that are driving the movement. But there's some, I don't want to make over broads.
Yeah.
I don't want to be too broad, but it's like 90% of our members are women, and 90% of the people who apply to become a botanical sanctuary are women. It's just, that's what I see. Our membership has grown. I think when I started the job, we had like 800 members, and now we have like 5,000 members. I kind of came on like in the beginning, like created a website, we had a website, but it was like just text, it was really basic. You couldn't become a member online. So we did see kind of like an exponential growth and being able to reach people through social media, but now it feels like that it's very difficult now. Now it's like you can't get anybody's attention. So that's been difficult, and that's why we're going to make really this year about connecting with people and really advocating that people choose to connect with us, because we need that. We we all need each other. So yeah, it's social media. It's just like the algorithms changed. People don't want to open their email. All your email goes into your junk thing. So we've, when I started the job, we did tons of mailing every year, and then we got so much more return on this whole digital world. And now it's like, now we're going back to the mail because it's changed. So we've been overrun by the clickbait. So there's there's that element. So I do think I see the herb farming starting to take off. I mean, we have a long way to go, but that's something that I really want to see expand over the next 10 years. More domestic herb farms and companies forming long-term relationships with farmers. I don't know. I'd be curious to see what other people think. I mean, I do feel like, I don't know, in like the last 3 or 4 years, I feel like the quality of herbs that are being sold have actually gone down. And I don't know, or it's harder to, yeah, I'd be curious if I should do a big poll or like send it out to people.
Yeah.
I feel like there's a lot of innovation happening. I feel like there's a lot of new, smaller, like fantastic companies emerging, a lot of really great educators. But I don't know, just, in these last few years, and maybe it just got harder to get the plants during COVID and coming back with the supply chain issues. I think people, obviously a lot of plants come from wild harvested matter. But a lot of, and a lot of plants that we see in our final products are imported. And a lot of that material is stuff that we could be growing. So, yeah.
Well, it sounds like there's a number of issues on multiple fronts. So, you're not only, of course, business, you have to run a business, but then addressing the environmental. Real quick, you had mentioned forest farmer. Would you tell us a little bit more what that means? I didn't quite grasp it from what you were describing.
Yeah. I mean, obviously a really big one is, golden seal, cohosh, bloodroot, ginseng, Solomon seal. A lot of these woodland botanicals that are harvested from the wild can be propagated and grown in a forest environment. So when I speak of forest farmers, I guess it's, I mean, you could call it permaculture, you could call it agroforestry, but really growing these in-demand forest botanicals in the forest or along the edge of the forest, so that they're being intentionally cultivated. And that can happen on, kind of a wide spectrum. It can be as much as like, tilling in the forest and being a little bit more intensive about it, or just literally planting in the forest and, tending those plants.
Well, they should be
And-
better quality medicinally if they're growing more in their native environment as well, correct?
Well, yeah. And in some regards, I mean, a lot of those plants are being harvested from wild populations, and, our wild spaces are just being gobbled up by development and other things. And we don't have, I don't know. We're really kind of like a plant blind country. And then we have all these regulations for like GMPs and all these things that, like, in the processing, so concerned about cross contamination or yada, yada, yada. But yet someone can go and harvest cohosh and, give it to a dealer, gives it to a dealer. And that cohosh can sit in a warehouse for a decade before it ever gets ground up and put in a product. So it's also, so it's, the quality of the product can be really poor for like a number of reasons. Sorry about that.
Yeah.
Um,
So what would be the advantage? The forest farming is to prevent or still be able to cultivate a plant in its natural environment and discourage, hopefully, people from just taking all the native plants that.
Right.
Okay. And
Yeah.
so it's
And
kind of a
go
happy
ahead.
medium. It's kind of a happy medium between, not just planting it where it doesn't naturally grow that well and it's not going to have great medicinal quality.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I
Yeah,
understand.
I mean, there's multiple elements to it. I mean, I do think that, and I don't want to discredit people who do wild harvesting, because wild harvesting, in some cases can be perfectly acceptable. And also, there's so much, there's a lot to it, right? It's like what's going on in the ecology of the landscape where the plants are being harvested, what parts of the plants are you harvesting, right? And then it's the time scale of, when it gets harvested and processed to when it goes into the product, and so there's kind of issues along each one of those uh, steps in from when it gets harvested to when it becomes consumed in a product. But certainly in some cases, wild harvesting makes perfect sense, especially when you're not harvesting, say, the root. You're just harvesting the above ground parts. But yes, I do think that encouraging and being supportive and providing the skills and the knowledge to growing these forest botanicals is critical to the future conservation of these plants. But it's also critical to empowering people on how to grow and work with these plants. So we have a whole lots of web pages on the site about forest farming, and we have a free book called the Forest Farmer's Handbook, which goes into very detailed description of how to cultivate these plants in a forested environment. But yeah, it's interesting. It's like, I mean, black cohosh is, another interesting example, because it's a plant that when you harvest it in the wild, you can obviously harvest other very similar lookalikes, like doll's eye, that can be, super dangerous and toxic. So companies who, like German companies, came over and, gathered cohosh and then started growing it in Germany because they wanted to know what they were getting was the plant. You know what I mean? That's, adulteration is a big thing, and it can be not purposeful. I mean, being out in wild harvesting plants and knowing what plant you get and what plant you don't get. Some companies, took black cohosh out of their products completely because they didn't want the risk, and they couldn't have a source from a farmed source that they could be reliable. I mean, you can test one batch, but you can't test everything, So, and a lot of the herb companies, because they couldn't get a reliable source of black cohosh from Appalachia where it grows naturally, they're growing it in Oregon where they have no water. So it's a weird, there's just a lot of weird dynamics, so I do see, like, futuristically, I see an emergence of hopefully what will be the next generation of forest farmers and of herb farmers. I mean, a lot of the herbs that we're importing, we could be, growing here in the United States. I mean, even like most of the elderberry that is consumed in the United States is, imported elderberry. And, I mean, and the two varieties, are, have, I mean, they're very similar, but, maybe slightly different as well. There's no reason why we couldn't have a native elderberry industry that, you know, it's, so anyway, so that, you know, so it's not just the forest botanicals, it's also, you know, a variety of medicinal plants that are, you know, native to our region that we could be growing and producing our own products with.
There's you mentioned the next generation. I'd like to hit a couple of points here. We've gone off topic from how to become an herbalist, but this is, I mean, this is your realm too, so I don't want to like pass up this opportunity. You had mentioned the next generation. You mentioned land transfer. From who to whom is this land transfer happening? Are you speaking of?
Well, it's just aging out, right? So a lot of the people who own the land are in their 70s or 80s, you know? So we're witnessing a real transition in land ownership from one generation to the next. And it's, you know, it's certainly been a little tricky because maybe people of that older generation, you know, who are going to cross to the other side of the fence, you know, perhaps it was, you know, maybe easier to acquire land, right? It was, you know, a different socioeconomic dynamic. But that being said, you know, in rural areas, it's still affordable to acquire land, and you know, property is transitioning over, and there's a lot of, you know, conservation organizations that are, you know, diving into that a little deeper, especially in regards to like landscapes that have really key ecosystem services, right? So, you know, having a new generation of forested landowners that are going to let their trees grow big so they can store more carbon, you know, wetlands, all these, you know, unique environments that serve really critical roles in the ecosystem. You know, and I think we are seeing a younger generation that's really more mindful, that's, you know, really more mindful of the environment and the bigger picture, right? Looking beyond themselves. And I think there's the older generation that wants to pass land on to, you know, future caretakers as well. But that's what I mean by the transfer of land ownership. It's just the people who the majority, the age medium of the people who, you know, have rural forested landscapes are aging out. And so it should be an opportunity where young people kind of feel inspired to be caretakers. And, you know, I think you see that, you know, it's like that, you know, it's almost like the back to land movement in the 70s, right? So like those people are now, you know, up there, and now we're seeing this like new generation of back to landers, but it's under a different, I don't know, maybe it almost seems even more imperative, right? Because now we recognize how critical these wild landscapes are.
So those who I interview who do call themselves herbalists. You say you don't call yourself a herbalist, but even Matt and Phyllis will say, you know, if you know one herb in 20 some ways, you know, a few ways to use it, you're an herbalist. They're pretty sure they're,
Yeah.
they're that. What do you wish everybody knew about herbs?
What do I wish everybody knew about herbs?
Yeah.
That's a great question. I guess that you're really, you know how like you, I think there's like a great Georgia O'Keeffe quote. What is it? It's like to see a flower takes time, like to have a friend takes time.
Mm.
Have you ever heard that quote?
Yeah.
And so I think that's what I want everybody to know, is that like it's your relationship with the plant. It's not anybody else's. Just like how you have a friend that you call up and you talk to, you know, and you have this like intimate relationship with them, or you have kind of an unfriendly relationship with them, but that's between you and that person. And so it's really between you and that plant. And though you can, read about plants and, learn from other people, it's really your own personal relationship. And that comes from just getting to know that plant. And it might be different, it's like they don't communicate how you might communicate with your friend, but you communicate in different ways. I find it so interesting that, and I'm sure other people like have this too, like someone, maybe you take a class, maybe you take Matt Wood's class and he tells you about this plant, maybe it's like, he's going to talk about the birch tree or something. And then the next thing you know, you're in a store and there's this like gorgeous painting of a birch tree. And then the next thing you know, you meet somebody and they're like, gosh, they tell you a story and the center of the story is the birch tree. And then, I know you've had that experience.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're like, what the heck?
What the heck?
Yes.
What the heck? It's like the plant is talking to you, you know what I mean? Or like somebody says something, or you take a class, or you looking through a book, and then you realize like that plant's been growing in my front yard like my whole life.
And then you finally see it, but you finally know it.
Yeah, it's like you're in high school again, and you're, walking through the hallways, and you just have the 3 or 4 people that you're talking to, but you don't realize there's all these other people. And then you're like, oh, now I got to meet you, and we were actually in high school together, and I didn't even like talk to you then, but now we're hanging out at the coffee shop. I don't know.
Yeah. That's been about so much of the stories of interviewing the herbalists. It's just these meandering paths. It's the synchronicities, and just also just following that inner guidance.
Yeah.
It's been so interesting to see those threads that are common. I think a great place to kind of wrap it up would be, what is it? What are some ways do you think everybody is impacted by the plants, but we just may not realize it? And why maybe you think of that, I'll tell you the reason behind that question. It's not one that's on my usual list. Is, when it comes to taking care of even our own bodies, a lot of us don't do it until we have a problem. And we don't realize all that our body is doing for us until like, oh gosh, that's not working that great. And then it's connected to this and this and this. And I think if we didn't hopefully have to go through crisis, in an environmental way, not only physical way, we might be aware. It's kind of the issues you were talking about. Like, oh, I just wish people knew. Maybe what are 1 or 2 ways that people may not realize that they are just like this with the plant realm before having to have a crisis?
Yeah. I mean, when I had my apothecary, my Paris apothecary, that was like a big theme, was that I wanted people to come and meet plants in like a positive way, like not in the crisis way. Like, come experience, an elderberry fizzy shrub, and like have that be a joyful thing. Plants should be something that, you enjoy. Right? Because then when you are sick, then you're going to feel more safe, to use that plant. But as far as, I mean, like the bigger question that you asked, I mean, I really see plants as a solution to everything. And I know that's like a super broad term, but they can clean our environment. They can clean the water. They can store carbon. They create the food we eat. They create the air we breathe. I mean, it's and then it gets into everything, our clothing, the packaging, I mean, it's just like endless. So I really think that plants can be extremely hopeful because they're accessible, and even if it's not going to cure, like whatever, because I think that's a tricky dance because people are really struggling with a lot of illnesses, and it can be really frustrating when you can't find what that thing is, but I think in the bigger realm, plants are extremely hopeful because they provide so many solutions to the things that we're facing. And I really, just the whole idea about how trees give off these volatile organic compounds, and we know that these volatile organic compounds like help our immune system. So it's like we don't even have to consume these herbs. We can literally just be in the forest and just be like dusted
Mhm.
these volatile organic compounds that are feeding and sustaining our immune system. I mean, that's some mind-blowing stuff. So I feel like once you kind of like, open up to all these ways that plants are helping us regulate our environment and regulate our bodies. I mean, I think there's just a real like comfort in that awareness.
I love the example that Matt gives when he's teaching about basswood or linden and how that used to be the gathering place of the old townspeople, if they didn't have a town hall. And whether they knew it or not, the reason was that when you gather under a basswood or linden, it has a natural calming effect. Even when you take a linden tincture or tea, it's very calming, but not in the way that like, well, maybe some people might want to go to sleep, but it's not like narcotic in
Right.
that. It's just
Yeah.
like soothing, relaxing, and it's absolutely fascinating. That yes, you can just take in whether it's volatile organic compounds. Well, it might be the pollen in that instance. I'm not
Right.
sure, but and some of it, we're just actually discovering
Yeah.
why or making the connections. At least we might not know why, but we're making these connections. And I, for one, grew up in an environment that was not environmentally centered. I mean, it was the beginning. I mean, recycling just came in much later into our environment. I'll just say it wasn't the top of the list. But I think personally, when people have a personal experience, like herbs and natural products were the answer to my health ailments, you reconnect in that way. And I'm not wishing that people have ailments to connect in that way, but it seems to be often how things happen. But
Yeah.
hopefully those problems are small and you can connect on really great levels, just like taking a linden tea is a wonderful,
Mm,
or maybe chamomile. That's one that people are very familiar with as
yeah.
well.
Totally.
There's so many. Well, I really, really appreciate you joining me today because your path has been so far very different from other paths of herbalists, and that's been the point. Is I want to illustrate that there are many ways. If you have a connection with the plants, there are many ways that you can make this more a part of your life. And but not to downgrade that. If you simply are incorporating them into your personal life, that of your families, that is significant and enough as well. But hopefully this has been inspiring to others.
I hope so.
How do people learn more about UPS? What else, any special offers you have going on? Anything that you want people to know about?
Yeah, I mean, we just wrapped up the launch of our fundraiser. You can still donate to it. It's, of course, there was like the book Planting the Future, which is an amazing book that was written in the really early days that has chapters on several of the at-risk plants. Seeding the Future is, a vision of United Plant Savers starting a medicinal seed bank. And we're super excited about that project. And then, of course, we're celebrating 30 years in 2024. It's easy website, unitedplantsavers.org. We obviously encourage membership. We have a ton of stuff going on and opportunities in Ohio. We have the 360-acre botanical sanctuary. It's got 5 or plus miles of trails. It has our Center for Medicinal Plant Conservation. And then we just acquired the Brick House Apothecary in Pomeroy. That's about a 10-minute drive. So we have lodging options, and a super exciting thing is that we've been building this library. It started with Jim Duke donating his library, and Stephen Buhner donated his library. John Staba, professor in pharmacognosy, donated his library, and David Winston recently committed to donating his library. So we're really building this incredible library for people to come and research and study plants. So stay tuned on opportunities with that. It's Instagram and Facebook and all that stuff. It's just great. Even if you're not able to become a member right away, just join our mailing list, because we have all kinds of online events. We just launched, and I'll send you a link to share. You can go on UPS's YouTube account, and we got a grant from the Ohio Humanities Foundation to do a film on women's reproductive health in Appalachia. And it's a really profound film. It's 30 minutes long, and anybody can watch it from our YouTube channel. So yeah, we're just always doing really interesting things, and challenging people to think, deeply about their relationship with the plant world. And we would love for people to come and visit. And yeah.
Well, I have to say, what an accomplishment, though, too, is 17 years in building United Plant Savers. With you being a part of United Plant Savers, there's land, there's buildings, there's films going on, and your website is really wonderful. And
It's a
that's
great resource. Yeah. Anybody can access it. And of course, like, you become a member, we have all kinds of membership benefits, right? I mean, so many people offer percentages off on programs. And I think the list of membership benefits, you get your membership like back tenfold.
many times over.
Yeah. And we have the reciprocal admissions program, where you can use your membership card to get into other gardens. It's like $35, but it's hundreds of dollars in value.
Well, just an example, what you save on Matthew Wood Institute of Herbalism programs, you will pay for the membership many times over. Yes. We're also including a UPS membership with any new program enrollment from 2024 on. So we are always looking to support United Plant Savers and appreciate what you guys do. Absolutely amazed. I love watching and see what you're doing. You're in the nonprofit realm. There's crossover. I love gleaning. I love to see what you're doing in gleaning business ideas as well, and always enjoy talking and collaborating. It's a pleasure. Yeah. I really encourage people to follow all your social media. I just saw the film pop up on my YouTube notifications the other day, and you really do amazing work. And so congratulations. And I know you have a wonderful team behind you as well. I've been in contact with them as well. Very thorough.
Yeah, great. Thanks for having me.
It's absolutely my pleasure. And we'll talk again soon.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye.